So why are you so outraged by what he's saying?
I'm not outraged. I just think that you all are fairly stupid. And everything that's being said is ridiculous. And it's just like a comedy show
You
being
think you
played
can
out by
change your sex? How can you ever call anybody stupid?
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and I promise you, this one is going to have you pausing the screen more than once. So we have got Piers Morgan sitting across from a panel that includes Andrew Wilson, feminist Julie Bindel, sports commentator Emily Austin, and trans rights advocate Stacia Underwood. The topic starts with trans athletes in women's sport, but it escalates into a full-blown confrontation about gender roles, reproductive duty, birth rates, and what it actually means to hold a society together. And just when you think the debate cannot get any more intense, Stacia calls the entire panel fairly stupid, and Piers Morgan immediately comes back with one of the most devastating one-liners of the whole conversation. Trust me, you want to stay for that moment because the way it lands is something you have to see for yourself. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from right now. It genuinely blows my mind how far this community reaches, and I love seeing where you guys are all tuning in from. All right, let's get into it.
Well, we'll see.
Well, that's what Andrew kept saying, all of you. Do you include Emily, Andrew, or not?
Well, I just assumed it. I just assumed it. But this is the truth. The truth is, we begin with these crazy ideas, right? Under patriarchal rule, under men, this would never have happened, right? If you look at how men vote, they vote against this nonsense. And it's fathers who are on the front lines against it. It's women who are trying to transition the children, not men. Give me a case example of where male fathers are trying to transition their kids. It doesn't exist. It's a female-only phenomenon. Literally a female-only phenomenon.
That is insane.
Yeah, show me one male father who's fighting in the courts to transition their son to a girl.
Actually,
Nowhere.
I made a
That's
podcast series
I've seen men on
about this.
TikTok that are diseased.
I interviewed quite a few fathers that are pushing for this. But the point is that this is something that benefits men, and it's men that are the ones that are saying they're women. They are all of a sudden the oppressed, and feminists like me are the oppressor, and that they're too weak and pathetic to fight and play against other men. And what do? They come and beat up on women.
Do you vote left, ma'am?
I don't know what vote left means.
Do you vote for the left-wing party of your nation?
Do you vote for Democrats?
Do you vote for what would be considered the Democrats of your nation?
No, I wouldn't have voted for the Democrats. I would not have voted for the disgrace of that party. And I also wouldn't have voted for Trump. But the point is,
if we look, hang on, let me finish with a follow-up. Very quickly.
We live in a different context.
What I'm saying to you is this: it's very simple. If you look at the voting patterns of women in both the UK and the United States, they're usually the deciding vote when it comes to degeneracy. That includes it includes on the trans issue. So here you are, it's the very thing that you push for empowerment of women that is now causing your very problem. You have to now convince women. Men are already there. Men have already said, nope, we don't want this, we never wanted it, it's garbage.
To be women.
Yeah, apart from the women who are claiming to be men, which now it's almost equalized. Remember that part? Right? This phenomenon, though, is categorically rejected by men and reinforced by women. And TERFs like you did everything that you could possibly do in order to push that. You did everything you could do to push that. And now you get to reap the whirlwind. So I don't care if women in their sports teams are getting their teeth kicked in. I don't care. Reap what you sow. As you sow, so shall you reap. And you get exactly what you deserve.
You seem like a lovely person.
I'm sorry that you have to deal with the consequences of your own actions.
This is the part that stopped me completely, because Andrew Wilson just said something that most people are too afraid to say out loud, and the room did not know how to handle it. He made the argument that under traditional male-led structures, the push to medically transition children would never have gotten this far. And his reasoning was not just emotional. He backed it with a pattern. He pointed to voting data. He pointed to who is actually showing up in courtrooms fighting for these procedures. And then he said something that hit different. Andrew said this: if you look at how men vote, they vote against this nonsense. and it's fathers who are on the front lines against it. You have to understand why that lands so hard, because it reframes the entire conversation. This is no longer just a culture war talking point. He is making a structural argument about who is driving a specific social movement and who is pushing back against it. And whether you agree with him or not, nobody on that panel gave him a direct, factual rebuttal to that point. Nobody. Then he went further. Andrew said this: "It's women who are trying to transition the children, not men." Now I know that sounds like a provocative line designed to shock people, but here is what is interesting. Julie Bindel, who is a feminist, did not jump up and call that completely false. That silence tells you something. And here is the part that blew my mind. Andrew did not stop at making the argument. He turned it into an accountability moment. He looked directly at Julie and said, "You did everything you could do to push that, and now you get to reap the whirlwind." And then he followed it with, "I don't care. Reap what you sow." Now, people are going to hear that and call it cold. But what Andrew is actually doing there is something that conservative voices have been trying to articulate for years. That when you champion a system and that system produces consequences, you cannot suddenly act surprised by those consequences. That is not cruelty. That is called logical consistency. And the panel had no answer for it.
Andrew made a lot of news on social media with his debate with Tommy Lahren last week after accusing her of being a covert feminist. Let's remind people of that clip which went viral.
Most men are born to be protectors and providers. I can't imagine my dad saying, you know what, to my mom, you know what, I'm not going to be a protector and a provider unless you do this. That's not how real men operate. Real men are protectors and providers, and they marry women who hopefully have some virtue, but also bring a lot to the table as well, that are great mothers, great wives, caretakers of the home. There's nothing wrong with being a traditional wife and mother.
So, Emily, where do you sit? Are you a covert feminist like Tommy? Did you agree with Andrew's assessment?
I'm not a covert feminist. I am very outwardly, you know, the word feminism has been hijacked by like the woke left, who uses it as an excuse for psychotic women and liberals to scream on the streets, we want equal rights when we have equal rights. I'm more so an empowered woman who encourages other women to, you know, be independent, work hard, chase your dreams. And that doesn't come at the expense of being feminine. It doesn't come at the expense of, now as a feminist, you need to eradicate all men. I don't think everything is so black or white. Listening to that debate, they spoke a bit about gender roles, and here's my take on that. If you're gonna have gender role expectations for your man, that's a personal choice. Emily Austin has high expectations of her man. He has to be working hard, he should be successful, he should, you know, pay attention to how I feel. Like, there should be certain gender roles. He has to provide for the family, not solely, but he should be providing for his family. These are gender roles. As a woman, I learned how to cook, I know how to clean. My grandmother always tells me, my mother tells me, Emily, you're gonna be a good wife, you're gonna be loyal, you're gonna be supportive, you're gonna act like a lady. Now, there's many women who don't want to play into the gender roles, which is fine, but then don't expect your man to go out and become masculine. I think it's equal. Like, set the expectation and then date people who meet your expectation. But in terms of covert feminism, first of all, it's such a silly term. Either you support women or you don't. And I'm not talking about the trans argument right now.
Not only is it not a silly term, it is true that most of the political pundit women on the right are covert feminists. And I'll just ask you the same exact question I asked Tommy.
Because the word feminism got
Let me finish the question. Let me finish the question. No, I'm talking about all the way back to first wave feminism. Okay, you are feminists, and I'll explain by asking you the same question. If it is men's duty in society to procure, refine, protect resources, which then women and children are the primary beneficiaries of, which they are. What societal duty, which is equal to that, do women have? What is it?
Women, we're going to have children. Men will never understand the burden of carrying a child.
So you have a duty to reproduce?
I expect women to be able to cook and clean.
Wait, so you have women have a duty to reproduce?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So that's the one duty that's on par. Great. So that's one duty that's on par with that. I totally agree. Are they? Or is it the case that in every single
Most
nation in the
women,
West, we are
assume,
under
having
reproductive
kids.
rates in every single one of them? In every single
Agreed.
nation in the West, we are lower than where we need to be for reproduction. So it seems that men are fulfilling their social duty and women are not. And the problem with the right is that the right doesn't ever address this, and right-wing females never address this. Instead, they say it's equal. Work and motherhood are equal. They're not equal. Not only are they not equal, but let me give you another example here. As you dive into this, try to understand that what you do is you actually hamstring women by telling women they should go and be girl boss babes and go to college starting in their 20s. They actually destroy their prime reproductive years. They destroy them by having families later. It's the primary cause.
Okay, that's silly. I'm 23.
Hang on, listen.
It's
the primary cause for the reproduction crisis. It's the primary cause of the reproduction crisis in the West, is that with women defer families till they're in their 30s. Why do you think the average age of marriage is 32 in the United States? I think it just got raised to 33. Yes, you're going to have way less kids. Okay, part of girl bossing is when you say career women are right on par with mothers. They're not, and society should be glorifying one.
This section is where the debate shifted from culture war into something much more uncomfortable, because Andrew Wilson stopped talking about trans athletes and started asking a question that almost nobody in mainstream political conversation is willing to ask seriously. He asked, what societal duty, which is equal to men's duty to provide and protect, do women actually have? And here is why that question is so powerful. It is not a trick. It is not a trap. It is a genuine structural question that exposes a huge gap in modern feminist thinking. For decades, the conversation has been about expanding what women can do and access in society, which is fine. But almost nobody talks about the reciprocal obligations that make a society actually function. Andrew forced that conversation into the open. Now, Emily Austin answered, and to her credit, she did not dodge. Emily said this: women are going to have children. Men will never understand the burden of carrying a child. That was a real answer. And Andrew actually acknowledged it. He said, fine, reproduction is the one duty that is on par. I accept that. But here is where it got really interesting, because he immediately followed that concession with data. He pointed out that in every single Western nation right now, birth rates are below replacement level. Every single one. And what that means, if you follow the logic, is that if reproduction is the agreed societal duty of women, and reproduction is failing across the entire Western world, then something has gone seriously wrong. Now, here is the education moment that I think people need to actually understand. This is not a new pattern in history. Ancient Rome experienced almost the exact same thing in its late Republic period. Roman scholars at the time literally wrote about women choosing city life and social status over having families. The Roman Senate actually passed legislation trying to incentivize marriage and childbirth. It did not work. And within a few generations, Rome's population dynamics shifted dramatically. I am not saying Western civilization is Rome. I am saying the pattern of a society struggling to reproduce itself is not new, and it has never ended well when ignored. Andrew then said this: career women are right on par with mothers. They're not, and society should be glorifying one, not socially shaming the other. That is the most clarifying thing said in this entire segment. Because he is not saying women cannot work. He is saying that a society which treats every lifestyle choice as equally valuable to civilization is a society that has lost the ability to prioritize its own survival. That is a serious argument, and Emily, who is sharp, visibly struggled with it.
Not socially shaming the other, but you shouldn't give them the same elevation you give to mothers and matrons of families. That is pure covert feminism.
Okay. I'm going to answer you with the following. I don't believe in the glorification, and especially I see it amongst Gen Zers, of not having children. I actually think it's disgraceful, and I don't think it's a flex at all to brag about not wanting to repopulate. It just shows me that you're so insecure that you're going to be a bad parent that you're not doing it. On the other hand, I'll ask you a question in return. Would you prefer a child growing up in a damaged family with a mother who clearly wasn't ready to raise a child and raise potentially what could be a deranged child who grows up to be a serial killer or a murderer, or how about this, just a really bad person, rather than wait a few more years until she's ready to have her kid and then raise a mensch? What do you prefer?
Well, so here's what we can see when we break this down. What we see when we break this down is the abuse happens in the public school, where you're 100 times more likely to be essayed than you are if you're in a Catholic church. We see that if it is the case that you're a single mother, you are a single mother, especially by choice, that is usually the selection of stepfather that leads to the abuse of the children. We also can see via the stats that you're completely just insane here. You are actually, if you stay inside of a family where mom and dad don't even like each other, your outcomes are still better than if you, the girl boss, goes, I just don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel fulfilled, and so I need to go and date the neighbor down the road or whatever, right? The truth is that regardless of your fulfillment, children are the duty. The next generation is the duty, and women have a duty to keep the family intact as well. They're responsible for most of the divorces. They file for the most amount of divorces, not because of abuse, but because of irreconcilable differences. And when asked, I don't feel fulfilled. And it's like, that's not how we run a society. It's literally a death sentence for our whole society. Look at what's going on in the UK. It's a death sentence for them.
Okay, let me bring in Stacia, who's been grimacing throughout that. Stacia, why are you so outraged by what he's saying?
I'm not outraged. I just think that you all are fairly stupid. And everything that's being said is ridiculous. And it's just like a comedy show.
You think you can change your sex? How can you ever call anybody stupid?
The mask came all the way off in this final section, and it happened from both sides of the table in completely different ways. Andrew kept pressing. He went into divorce statistics. He pointed out that women file for the majority of divorces in Western countries, and that the most common reason given is not mistreatment. It is feeling unfulfilled. And then Andrew said this: that's not how we run a society. It's literally a death sentence for our whole society. Now, you can disagree with how bluntly he said it, but the underlying data point is real and documented. Western divorce rates are high. Women do initiate the majority of them, and the social science research on outcomes for children in single-parent homes compared to two-parent homes is not ambiguous. It consistently shows worse outcomes across education, income, and mental health. Andrew was not making that up. He was saying it more aggressively than most would, but the foundation of his argument was not fiction. And then Piers Morgan turned to Stacia to get her response to all of it. And this is where everything collapsed in real time. Because instead of engaging with a single argument that had been made, the voting patterns, the birth rate data, the divorce statistics, any of it, Stacia said this: I'm not outraged. I just think that you all are fairly stupid. That was the response to a panel that had spent the last several minutes presenting statistics and structured arguments. Fairly stupid. And then, this is the moment. Piers immediately fired back. He said this: you think you can change your sex? How can you ever call anybody stupid? That line landed because it exposed something the entire debate had been circling around. You cannot dismiss an entire panel as intellectually beneath you while simultaneously holding a position that the majority of the scientific and sporting community has now pushed back against heavily. The credibility gap in that moment was enormous, and Stacia had nothing left. No argument, no data, just the word stupid, aimed at people who had just spent 20 minutes making structured, sourced, uncomfortable points. That is the thing about dismissing people instead of engaging them. It tells the audience everything about whether you actually have a counterargument. And in this moment, The answer was painfully clear. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.